All right, Rabosai, good evening, a Gesint and Zimmer. Hopefully everyone had a meaningful and uplifting Tisha B'Av, and now Baruch Hashem, it is a schus to begin our journey towards Shabbos Nachamu, to begin our journey towards Nechama, to begin our journey towards Mashiach together in Maseches Basra. Today's daf, meaning Tuesday's daf, is daf Memtes 49. Me'eres Hashem, we have an ambitious goal for tonight. Memtes and Nun. We're not going to rush, but we'll also move at an expeditious pace. So we'll say, so today's daf, we're starting Tuesday's daf, Memtes. So we are picking up on the bottom of Memches Mebez 48b, and we are actually picking up two lines up from the bottom, just to reorient ourselves a little bit. There was an interesting case with two guys, one by the name of Tabi, one by the name of Papoi. Tabi was a powerful guy. He coerced Papoi to go ahead and sell him. In this case, it was a kinrad, a tree, particular tree. Or, right, actually, two years so in the Rashbam in terms of what he coerced him to sell. But again, the truth is the object itself is even somewhat irrelevant. So what happens? So of course, then again, Papai has no choice but to go ahead and sell, so he does. Meanwhile, what ended up happening? Rabbah went ahead and signed on two documents. One was the document of sale, and the other one was what we call a moda'ah. Moda'ah means a document of objection. Now, literally what that means is when a person goes in and says, I'm being coerced to sell, and that's and by the tremendous Yeshchach to Rabbi Ari Lerner for the refreshments tonight. Incredible. I don't think he went home. I think this is when he's breaking his fast on. So, sorry, but thank you. And also tremendous thank you to Mesha Abramson, who mamish worked so hard over last night, today, Baruch Hashem, to make sure that everything really technologically went well. So we're very lucky to have such a wonderful chevra. So in any event, so Rabbah goes ahead and signs on two documents. One document said that Papoi went ahead and made a modah. He objected to going ahead and selling, and he put that in print in a document that he was being coerced to sell. The other one, of course, the document was the document of sale itself. So the Shaila, of course, so then again the Gemara essentially said that halacha l'maisa, had Rav Huna not signed on the modah, ultimately the sale would have been valid. Why? Because Rav Huna is of the opinion that even a coerced sale is still a valid sale. Remember again, this is the opinion of Rav Huna. I know Monday feels like many moons ago, but on Monday morning when we did this daf, this is the famous position of Rav Huna of Tal Yuha v'Zabin Zvine, that if you coerce someone to sell, ultimately, the sale is a valid sale. Rav Huna's essential idea is because every sale really incorporates some element of coercion, because a person would never really go ahead and sell something if they didn't have to. As such, a coerced sale is a good sale. So the Gemara says, Ini, is this so? Is this so? Now, if you look at the Rashbam says, Ini, kilomar heich batla moda'a shechasam barabba bar barchana, es hashkalta shechasam hu atzmo. So now, remember again, so what the Gemara suggests over here is that the sale between Tabi and Papoi was invalid. Why was it invalid? Because Tabi had gone ahead and got the name exactly. So Papoi had gone ahead and written a modah. So because he signed on that modah, on that document, ultimately again saying that he did not want to sell, therefore again that invalidated the document of sale itself. So the Gemara says, Ini, is that so? That a signed modah will go ahead and a signed modah will invalidate the document of sale. So the Gemara says, Nachman said as follows. Both said last line 48b. Ha'idim shamru amana hayu dvareinu. Watch this. If witnesses said we signed an shtar amana, and both said, what's the shtar amana? Shtar amana is a fascinating document that says Reuven lent Shimon $1,000. There's only one problem, and witnesses sign on it. There's only one issue. Reuven didn't lend Shimon $1,000. Reuven plans on lending Shimon $1,000, or Reuven perhaps will lend Shimon $1,000. Now, from Reuven's perspective, Reuven's like, look, I got to get this document, from the borrower's perspective, right? I got to get this document drawn up now. Everybody's around, the lender, the borrower, the witnesses. Let me just get this done. I will say that is called the shtar amana. Now remember, what is the shtar amana? What does it depend on? It depends on the honesty and integrity of the lender. That the lender, because it's an easily exploitable situation where the lender could go ahead and halacha l'maisa produce a document that says that Reuven lent money to Shimon, and it's easily exploitable. So we do not produce a shtar amana. You cannot go ahead and essentially create a prospective loan document, because the document has to reflect the reality that occurred, especially at the time that the witnesses sign it. So to write a document that represents something that may occur in the future, and to have witnesses sign on that that is highly problematic. So therefore, again, the Gemara says as follows: if witnesses say, now, both say, just here's the case. We have a loan document. The loan document says that Reuven lent Shimon $1,000, and it's signed by witness A and witness B. And the witnesses say, the truth is, this transaction never happened. It's a shtar amana. We filled this out proactively, prospectively, and in the event that one day Reuven lends Shimon money. What's the halacha? Top of Memtes 49a. We're flying. Ein ne'amanin. Ultimately, again, they're not believed. They're not believed. Yet, moda hayu dvarenu. Let's say, again, I won't say, let's say the witnesses say that it's true that we went ahead and we signed on this document, but it was a coerced transaction, and therefore we have a moda. Right, that ultimately, again, the whatever it is, the seller or the borrower, right, or really the seller works, or the seller was coerced, and therefore it's a moda. Ein ne'amanin. Ultimately, again, they're not believed. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that when witnesses come along, if you have a document that says a transaction occurred, and then witnesses say, but by the way, the transaction was under duress, we don't believe the witnesses. So how does that stem with what happened on Amud Beis? Gemara says, no, big difference. Oh, we'll say very, very big difference. When do we not believe witnesses to say that there was a moda, that this was under duress? When there is no documentation to support that duress assertion. So for example, let's say we have a document. The document says, Reuven sold Shimon a field. And then the witnesses say, it's true, Reuven did sell Shimon a field, but Reuven was coerced. Reuven was coerced. Now, there's no documentation backing that up. There's no document backing that up. There's just a statement. Halacha l'maisa, that we do not believe the witnesses. Why? Because Rabbi say a document is a document is a document. And a document is going to hold water against the statement of the witnesses. So a moda cannot undermine a document when the document is in writing and the moda is verbal. On the other hand, aval b'shtara, asi shtara umar l'shtara. But that's different. We'll say, but what happens to the following? Let's say Reuven sold the field to Shimon, and there's a document that says that he sold it to Shimon, but there's also a document that records that Reuven sold under duress. Okay, that works, right? Why does that work? Because the shtar of the moda, right, the shtar represent, we'll call it the coercion shtar, the shtar that highlights the coercion is in writing, and therefore again that can undermine the authenticity of the document of sale. Coming full circle, that's the case over here with tabai and papai. Right, Tabi forced papai to go ahead and sell the tree. Again, that coercion was recorded in a document. Even though there was also a document of sale, because the coercion was recorded in a document, that we'll call it the coercion document, has the ability to go ahead and undermine the authenticity of the sale document. Makes perfect sense. But if all you have is a sale document, and the fact that coercion happened is what we'll call bal peh, it's just somebody signing this over, but there's no documentation for it. So reported coercion cannot undermine a bona fide document, which also makes sense. I also want to point out something very interesting, which is you have to understand, we have to be very careful with this coercion thing, right? Why? Because if you think about it, it is easily exploitable. Right? Think about this for just a moment. Any person who gets into a transaction and then has, seller's remorse, right? Seller's remorse, buyer's remorse, could claim what? I was coerced. And that's very dangerous. You could really undermine the very foundation of just transactions. So that's why Rav Huna, when Rav Huna says that a coerced transaction stands, it's not Rav Huna being indifferent to the difficulty or pain that people undergo, but rather, again, it's Rav Huna saying, listen, for transactional law to work, we have to be able to rely on a shtar. And if there's a shtar that says that the item was sold, then that's what we go with. Now, inachinami, if you do have the coercion recorded in a document, even Rav Huna will agree that will undermine the authenticity of the transaction. So Rabosai, so for our purposes right now, you have two things to remember. Only two things in the entire world. These are for the next hour, not even hour. Yankee, I don't want to avoid contact with Yankee, right? For the next couple of minutes, right, that we're going to be in shir. So there are two things to remember. Number one, Rav Huna says a coerced sale is a sale. That's number one, okay? And therefore, again, if someone claims coercion, essentially the halakha says we don't care. When's the one time we care about coercion, or coercion can undermine the authenticity of a transaction? If the coercion was recorded in a document, right? So if Reuven's selling Shimon a field, and Reuven says, okay, Eidim, we're going to sign the document, and Reuven says to the Eidim, guys, I'm being coerced. and I need you to record this in the document that I'm being coerced to do this, then the coercion document undermines the authenticity of the actual transaction. Beautiful. Let's go back to Gufa Amrav Nachman. Amanu hayudvarenu ein ne'emanin, moda hayudvarenu ein ne'emanin. So Rabbi says, Rav Nachman just said before, if witnesses come along, right? So there's a document that says Reuben lent Shimon $1,000, and the witnesses say, you know what? It's what's called the shtar amona. We never actually saw Reuben lend $1,000. Reuben said he was going to lend Shimon $1,000, so we figured let's go ahead and write up the shtar already. But we never actually saw the document. We just assumed the transaction was going to happen, and no one was going to produce the document before the actual transaction occurred. If witnesses say that, we do not believe them. We take a document at its face value. Similarly, again, Modah, same idea. Witnesses witness a transaction, and the witnesses claim it was under coercion. Unless the coercion is recorded in a document, we don't believe them either. So the Gemara goes back to Umar Bar Avashi says, Amana hayadvarinu ein ne'emanin. So listen to this. So Umar Bar Avashi says, if witnesses claim that the document was a shtar amana. So again, we have a document that says Reuben lent Shimon $1,000. The witnesses are claiming that we never actually saw the loan occur. We just wrote this in the event that the loan occurs, a shtar amana. We trust the parties not to produce it until it's an actual transaction. So Mar Bar Avashi says, we do not believe the witnesses. However, Moda hayu dvarinu ne'emanin. If the witnesses say that the transaction was coerced, we do believe them. Now both say, apparently the Chiddush over here is we do believe them even if what? Even if what? Even if the coercion is not in writing. So Gemara says, my taima, what's the reason for that? I'm sorry, I take that back. If they have a modah, we do believe them. My taima, what's the difference? So there's a very big distinction. What's the big distinction? That at the end of the day, a shtar amana should have never been written to begin with. Shtar amana should have never been written. Rabosai, not allowed to write a shtar like that. However, Rabosai, a shtar modah, or I should say, a coerced transaction could be committed to writing even if it's coerced. Why? Because we also generally where there is coercion, right, that means again, so one party's taking advantage of a different party. Usually again, the coerced party doesn't have the ability to get out of the transaction, otherwise he wouldn't be coerced. So the idea over here is in a coerced transaction, the idea of writing down a moda'ah is permissible. It's permissible and it's even encouraged because that's the way that the coerced party is going to be able to get out of it. So therefore, interestingly enough, Mar Bar Avashi says we never believe witnesses that a shtar is a shtar amana because it is illegal to write a shtar amana. We will believe witnesses that something is a shtar moda'ah. Why? Because it is permitted and maybe even proper to write the shtar modah. If you're witnessing a transaction and you know that one of the parties ultimately is being coerced, and that party asks you, the coerced party asks you to commit the coercion to writing or to document the coercion in writing, it is the right thing to do so. Incredible, incredible. So what's that? I'm sorry? Right, true, very true, very true. Beautiful. Okay, let's go back there. Says the Gemara, V'lo ish chazaka b'nichsei ishto. Ultimately, again, a man does not have the ability to establish a chazaka in his wife's property. So so we spoke about this before. Remember again, what does chazaka require? Chazaka requires really three things. We always said two, but it's really three. Number one, taina. How did you get here? How did you get to his property? Number two, duration. And really number three, there has to be that there's no other reason for you to be in this property other than the fact that you're the owner. But if there's another good reason that you're in this property, then you can't establish chazaka. So the paradigmatic case, for example, is a sharecropper. Right? The sharecropper can't establish chazaka because, of course, my sharecropper claims that he's the owner of my land. Of course, you've been in my land for 3 years uncontested. You work for me. So the similar idea applies in marriage. That a husband, for example, and this goes both ways, a husband below ish bechazaka b'nichsei ishto. A man, a husband, cannot establish a chazaka in his wife's property. Why not? Because again, a husband uses his wife's property, a wife uses her husband's property, and therefore again, no one's really making a macha one against the other. It's natural for them to use each other's property, and therefore there's no chazaka. Says the Gemara, Pshita, that's obvious. Kevan de pera lepera peru huda ka'achel. It's obvious, we'll say, because let's analyze this. Let's assume we're talking about a case of a field, right? So what is the husband, how is the husband utilizing his wife's field? How is he utilizing it? He's going and he's consuming the produce. Well, guess what? He's entitled to produce. He's entitled to produce, right? A Baal, a husband, is entitled to consume the produce of his wife's property. So of course he can't establish chazaka like that because he's utilizing something that belongs to him. To which the Gemara says, Lo tzricha dekasav la din udvarim eli b'nechsayich. No, what's the case? The case is where the husband doesn't have peros. Why doesn't the husband have peros? Because he wrote to his wife, Din udvarim eli b'nechsayich. I have nothing to do with your property. So essentially, again, he's like giving up the right to peros. The Gemara says, 1 second. We've seen this for Abba. I don't understand. So you're telling me that if a man has peros in his wife's property, and then he writes the statement, Din udvarim eli b'nechsayich, that I don't have any rights in your property, that's it? He's given up, he's yielded his rights. But we learned, V'atanya omer lechaveru din udvarim eli asadezu, ve'eli esik ba v'yadim misulak esemena lo omer klum. Yet Abba said we learned that if you have partners, Reuven and Shimon are partners in a field, and Reuven goes ahead and says to Shimon, I have nothing to do with this field. I have no involvement in this field, right? Din udvarim, nothing to do with it. My hands are removed from it. Ultimately, again, such a statement is absolutely meaningless. Such a statement is meaningless. So I'll say, again, we've spoken about this before, that when you have an ownership interest or some type of interest in something, simply deciding that I'm out doesn't work. Doesn't work. If you have a right or you're vested in something, the only way to divest yourself of that is by utilizing some type of halachic mechanism. But to simply say, it's not mine, right? To simply say that it doesn't belong to me, that doesn't work. So in other words, a husband has peros in his wife's property. So if he doesn't want the peros, there's a way to do that. But saying, I'm out, dinu dvarim ein al sadezu, doesn't work. Doesn't work. So what's the case? Again, we spoke about this. This is the Musar Haskell. We've spoken on this a number of different times, that when you have an issue in life, saying that it's not my issue, or just simply absenting yourself from dealing with the issue does not work. Does not work. Reuven and Shimon are partners. Reuven wants to get out of the partnership, saying, okay, I'm done. No, there's a mechanism. You have an issue in life. You have to work it through if you want resolution. Simply absolving yourself of the problem, simply saying, I'm not involved, does not work. So, Amrila, Arviana, Masnisim, Ekosev Lava, Odarusa. Oh, no, both say, watch this. What's the case? The case is here where the husband doesn't have peros. So we'll say, so again, remember, let's just analyze what's happening over here. Here's the progression. Mishnah said husband doesn't have rights in his wife's property. The Gemara says, of course he doesn't. Why would he have rights? Well, in other words, let's play this out. How Reuven's married to Rachel. How is Reuven claiming chazaka? How is he claiming chazaka? How is he claiming chazaka? Right? 3 years. Right? He's consuming the peros of the field for 3 years. Yeah, and what? You're entitled to peros. You're entitled to peros. How could that be demonstrative of chazaka? Oh, the Gemara says, no, he doesn't have peros. Well, how doesn't he have peros? Someone says, he said, Dinu dvarim eli asa, I have nothing to do with this field. That doesn't work. That doesn't take away, that doesn't, so to speak, divest him of his peros rights. But what's a good case? I'm going to read the Masnisim bekosev lava oda arusa. Interestingly enough, the Mishnah is talking about a case. We'll say, what can he do? While they're still in Erisin, while they're still in the initial stage of marriage. Now remember again, a husband only gets the rights to his wife's produce when? During Nisuin. But during Erisin, what he could do is, before he gets those rights, he could deny himself those rights. He could kind of absent himself from them. Rav Kahana says, well, say, I'm a base, that when a person has literally, nachla literally means an inheritance, but in this context it means a right. When a person has a right that is coming to him from somewhere, he has the ability to go ahead and prevent that right from vesting. In other words, once you already have peros, you need a mechanism in which to disentangle yourself from the peros. If you don't yet have peros, then you have the ability to kind of block the right from ever vesting. So therefore, during Erisin, when a husband does not yet have rights, peros rights, in his wife's property, he could say, no thank you, I don't want it. And the simple no thank you prevents it from vesting. So therefore, also the Gemara is suggesting over here is that halacha l'maisa, the case in the Mishnah must be a case where the husband went ahead and, during Erisin, said no thank you to the peros, right? I don't want the peros. Therefore, again, the right never vested. And because the right never vested, I might have thought that maybe consumption of peros for 3 years does establish chazaka. Kamash Malon, no, a husband never establishes chazaka in his wife's produce. I will say it's also a tremendous Musar Haskell in this. If you think about this in just a moment, this idea of person can stipulate that a right that is not yet vested has the ability or doesn't vest. So what that means is, in life, if you are proactive in dealing with your challenges. In other words, if a person is roa es hanolad, a person sees what's coming down the pike, a person is able to see what problems are going to materialize before they actually materialize, you could proactively deal with things and prevent them from ever becoming problems in the first place. If you don't deal with your life issues, and the issues they vest in you, they vest in your life, it's a much more complicated process to go ahead and resolve them. But if you are roa es hanolad, if you see things coming down the pike, and you see problems as they emerge before they vest in your life, and you proactively deal with them, you can neutralize the problems sometimes even before they become your own problems. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. So the Gemara says, because Rabbi says in general, if halacha gave you something, if halacha gave you a particular right, you have if halacha gave you, we'll call it an entitlement, you have the ability to say what? No, thank you. No, thank you. So therefore, a husband during Erusin has the ability to say no, thank you to the peiros that technically would become his once there are nisuin. My kigon zos. What is kigon zos? Kidrafuna amravuna damravuna amarav yichol isha shetamar lebayla einin izonis ve'eini osa. So it's like Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, because Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, a woman can say to her husband, don't support me and I am not working. In other words, I will say the halacha is that a husband is obligated to go ahead and provide support for his wife. In return, Chazal said that she has to give her earnings to her husband, while the woman can say, listen, you instituted this for my benefit. No, thank you, I don't want the support. I will say, by the way, cases like this come up all the time, where you have a wife who makes more money than her husband, so she wants to keep the money. I'm not interested in handing over my earnings. Thank you for your willingness to support me. I can take care of myself. So she has the right to say, thank you, this is an entitlement that is due to me. No, thank you, I don't want the right. So the point over here is you see that you could be entitled to something, and yet you could say, no, thank you. Now we'll say now, okay, fine. So remember, all of this is trying to interpret in the Mishnah, what's the case of where a husband can't establish chazakah in his wife's property. The Gemara says, ha raya yesh. Now I will say that's something very interesting here. So what comes out of this is, let's say a husband is able to produce proof. Let's say he's able to produce proof that he did purchase a field from his wife. He purchased property from his wife. So it sounds like if he's able to produce proof to that effect, that he can create chazakah. So the Gemara says, 1 second, how is that so? Tema. But there's an issue. What's the issue? Why can't she say, nachas ruach hasisi lebaili? Even if the husband can produce proof that he sold a field to his wife, aren't we concerned that she could turn around and say, yeah, I quote unquote sold him, there's a document, but it's not really a transaction. You know what? I didn't want him to get upset. I didn't want to create shalom bayis problems. So he wanted to buy it from me. I sold it to him. Nachas ruach hasisi lebaili means I wanted to keep things calm. I wanted to keep my husband happy. So you want to buy the field? Here, buy the field. But I did not actually mean to commit transactionally. After all, we learned milot tanan. Did we not learn? Lakach mina ish v'chazar lakach mina isha mekcho batal. Listen to this. Let's say I go over to Reuven's married to Rachel. I buy a piece of property from Reuven. What's the issue with Reuven's property? Any married man's property is be careful how you answer this one, right? Is encumbered. Everything he owns is encumbered to the ksuva, to his wife. So what happens? Let's say I go over to Reuven, I purchase the field. Now I'm a chacham, so I decide, you know what, I'm just going to go back to Rachel and purchase it from Rachel, kind of buy out her encumbrance. Then what's the halacha? Mekcho batal. The sale is not good, which is very intriguing. Now, why is this sale not good? I bought it from Reuven and from Rachel. Alma amra nachas ruach hasisi lebaili. Hachanami tema nachas ruach hasisi lebaili. Why? Because what are we concerned about? We're concerned that even though I went back and bought it from Rachel, Rachel's going to say, I didn't really want to sell it to you, but I didn't want to get into an argument with my husband. So therefore, again, I just agreed to sell it, but I didn't really mean to consent to the transaction. So too over here, I will say we should say that even if halacha l'maisa, he brought a raya. Reuven brought a raya, brought a shtar, that he bought a field from his wife Rachel. It shouldn't work. Why shouldn't it work? Because she could always say, Nachas ruach asisi lebaili. I was just trying to make my husband happy, preserve shalom bayis, but it wasn't a real sale. To which the Gemara says, Ha'itmar Allah amra barafuna, lo nitzucha ella ba'osan gimel sados. So we'll say, so now watch this. Actually, okay, we'll say, Shkoyach, this brings to a close today's daf. Shkoyach, everyone. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Okay, 1 second. Just stop and start. Okay.